Hi everyone, apologies for the late start, just battling a couple of technical difficulties, but we are going to wait one more minute to see if anyone else wants to come in before we kick off. Okay, we're 4 past, so I think we're going to get going. Thank you for joining us today. Here with me, I've got Peter Harris. And Peter has over 3 decades of experience in the marketing and research functions and serves as the Chief Research Officer at Advantage Group International. He's been a driving force behind the evolution of research technology and methodologies, marking him as a trailblazer in B2B and community engagement. At the helm of Advantage Group International, he's introduced groundbreaking tools such as AI-driven qualitative analysis and custom solutions, making a significant impact on the global business practices. So Peter's career began in marketing and research, quickly advancing to leadership roles across diverse regions, including APAC, Europe, and North America. And Peter's dedication to innovation has not only positioned him as a central figure in his field, but also earned him recognition from the Research Society and the Australian Marketing Institute. For those that don't know me, my name's Ryan Stuart. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Kapiche, and I'm your guide on this journey through the ever-evolving landscape of customer experience, voice of the customer analytics, and AI. I've got close to 20 years of experience now in natural language processing and its application in a range of industries, including enhancing customer experiences. So join me as we dive deep into the world of insights, exploring the tools and tactics that are reshaping the way businesses understand their customers. So, Peter, I think to kick things off today, what I thought would be a good place to start is to talk about what I'm seeing from the internal and what you're seeing from the market research angle as it pertains to the responder crisis, in particular response rates and quality. And what I've seen on my side is that the response rates that internal VoC and insights teams are seeing significantly declining. I had someone say to me the other day that a 5% response rate was considered good or par for the course. If they were getting significantly below 5%, they would be concerned, which has caught me a little bit by surprise given its first-party data. But not just that, I've also seen the quality of responses falling off. What I mean by quality is the richness of information that's being delivered as a result of those first-party data initiatives significantly reduced. Response lengths low, completion rates in terms of are they actually getting to the end of the survey as opposed to just starting the survey, incredibly low. And it's posing a bit of a challenge for internal VoC and insights teams. But I wonder what you're seeing from the market research world.
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks, Ryan, and to Rhiannon. Thanks very much for Kapiche for hosting today and for inviting me to speak. Yeah, it's a real problem. It's such a interesting kind of like title, what's going on with the humble customer survey, something that we've been relying on, for reliable information for more than 50, 60 years. But right now, I think there is a crisis, and there's a kind of the twin challenges, which is there seems to be insufficient supply of kind of quality research participants, and there's an increasing proliferation of kind of bad data based off the world that we're living in right now. So there's a dual problem, and the impact, of course, is significant on decision making. I mean, consequences of declining response rates, of bad data quality means that we're going to make bad decisions based off what we're calling market research. So it's a real problem.
Yeah, it's in no small part on the voice of the customer side due to just overwhelming demand for people's opinions and surveys as well. So there's a bunch of factors that this decline can be attributed to that are probably reflective of broader changes in consumer behavior, technology, and market research. But Peter, what are your thoughts on the reasons for why we've seen such a sharp decline?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of bad surveys out there, frankly. There's survey saturation. Like think of your own life. How many surveys do you get? How many chances do offers do you get to give feedback compared to 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago? There's lots. And that can lead to fatigue, especially where there's kind of the surveys are kind of long, poorly designed. It's a terrible impact. It's a terrible experience on the brand. If you get from your favorite brand 10 terrible surveys within a 3-month period where you tell them the same thing and they're not listening to you, it's going to really erode your brand trust. And then pretty importantly, that people just don't have as much time as they used to. The competition for your attention. Think of your own life, Ryan. Every year there seems to be less time to do the things that you need to do. So it's just a simple, people don't have enough time. And then at the same time, we've got the advancements in technology, which obviously you're at the central, Kapiche is at the center of around generative AI. But along with that comes bots, that actually can lead to bad data.
Yeah, so let me just latch onto something that you said there, some of my own experience and not having enough time. I have a particular airline that I fly with all the time, and given my role, I tend to be quite receptive to when people send me a survey. I actually do click through and try and fill it out. And once I got off a recent flight, I got the survey via email. It might have been a day or two later that I think about it. And I was like, yeah, okay, of course I'm going to fill the survey out. So I clicked through and there was no kind of progress indicator on the survey. I just filled out the first page of questions. There was probably a reasonable number of questions there. Off the top of my head, probably about 10. And I was like, yeah, okay, look, 10 is still not ideal, but I can cop 10. So I filled out those questions and pressed the button. And then unbeknownst to me, the button was actually called, I think it said proceed or submit. I can't remember which two. And that took me to another page with another 10 questions. And then I did that, and then I hit the button again. It took me to another page with another 10 questions. And I was like, when is this process going to end?
Yeah.
Like I'm trying to be good here and give my input. I didn't know that they were going to try and take more and more of my time. It's interesting, that particular experience, because I think there's some survey vendors out there that will partially count. So if I had just filled out the first 4 questions for argument's sake, that would have been counted as a complete or at least a partial complete. So it kind of encourages you to just put as many questions in there as you want, because it doesn't matter how many the respondent answers, it's going to get recorded in your system. And it really encourages bad practices. And it's kind of turned the entire situation around from when surveys first came out, when I ever got my first ever survey, I was like, oh yes, this is such a fantastic opportunity for me to literally take the microphone and talk to this company and tell them what I think, and perhaps even naively play some sort of a role in improving the way that they're interacting with their customers and the way they're doing business. But that dynamic seems to have completely shifted now to I'm almost a product now in this survey. They are siphoning as much information out of me as I'm willing to give, and doing God knows what with it in order to try and improve their practice. So I think that's a real challenge on the kind of internal team side. But talk to me a little bit more about the market research side, because I know those challenges, why they might exist in the market research side, there's probably a much bigger challenge that exists on the market research side, probably encapsulated by the thing on the left here.
Yeah, I think, you picked up a good point, Ryan. Once it becomes a product, then you care more about, do you care more about just getting it finished, completing the quotas, getting the sample size you want, rather than the actual experience or actually getting the right answer? That's the scary thing, once we start turning things into a product and trying to a lack of transparency around what am I asking you to do, and if it's all about just plow through as many questions as I can because I've got your attention, then it becomes a product. Then it opens it up to fraud, and that's really the issue. And, poor quality is a significant issue in the market research field. And, that's a big problem. Like any expense in a company, that market research needs to show an ROI. And part of that ROI is it's actually helping us make better decisions. Now, if you have an increased amount of poor quality data, you'll make decisions based off incorrect information. If you can't make your waves of research repeatable, consistent with a consistent sample frame, then you're actually going to have the wrong answers. And then market research becomes, why are we actually bothering with market research if it's actually not leading us to better decision making? So, response quality is a problem. There's increased fraud. There's an inability, despite a lot of good work around digital fingerprinting and deduping, there's really an inability to detect fraud, and an increased reason to actually use bots to actually complete as many surveys as we can as fast as you can, because there's incentives. But bots can get through and answer any questionnaire sent to them. They can do it very quickly. But again, you're not going to get the quality that you need. So it's a real problem.
This must have really flipped on its head for agencies in the last 12 months, right? With the advent of ChatGPT, probably not so much with the advent of ChatGPT, but at the point in when they made it available via an API so that other people could leverage it. When you combine the current state of AI that can pass the Turing test, for those who don't know, the Turing test is, if I was to sit at a terminal and talk to something and I can't tell the difference between whether it's a human or an AI, then you will have passed the Turing test, and we're well and truly past that now. So we have AIs that can act and speak as if they're human, undetectable to humans. You couple that with the fact that a large chunk of the agency world rests on incentivizing responses. So, whether it's paid a small amount of money or whatever, you put those two factors together, and then probably add a third factor, I guess, which is what's considered a small amount of money in Australia, for example, might not be considered a small amount of money in another part of the world. Those three things come together to create this really undesirable situation that people, when they go to research agencies, might not necessarily be getting responses from real humans. Instead, they might be getting responses from bots.
Yeah, no, exactly. And again, it comes down to, what are we actually trying to do? If it's just to complete the sample that we're paying for, or fill the quotas that we're asking for with any information we don't care about, then it's not really a problem. Bots and farms are a perfect solution. If it's actually to get the right answer from a representative group of humans or customers, or then we've got a problem on our hands, and we have a problem on our hands.
So this decline in quality poses some pretty significant challenges for businesses and researchers relying on these surveys to make informed decisions, right? There are tons of reasons why this could be bad news for your VoC program. And I think they're pretty obvious reasons, right? If you are making decisions off this information and you can't be certain of the source or the quality, or I guess the realness of this information, it has a real potential to skew the decision making, skew whatever the outcome was that initiated the reason for you to do this research and collect this data in the first place. And it really obfuscates that value proposition of understanding the market and understanding the customer if you can't be certain that you are really getting data from the customer. And of course, removing bots for a second, just declining survey rates, response rates, even for first-party data, has a big implication for businesses when it comes to having confidence around understanding what's driving satisfaction and what's driving loyalty. You have to somewhat be cognizant that if you're going back to senior leadership saying, this is why people are satisfied or dissatisfied, and it's only based on 2, 3, 4% of your customer base, that's a risk. What's the flow-on effects that you're seeing from the market research side?
Well, we're in an environment where budgets are declining. It's a challenge to secure budget to do anything within organisations. So we really need to demonstrate ROI. But this type of the environment we're in is going to typically demand higher market research costs. The panel companies are trying their best to keep on top of it, but oversampling, cleaning sample will actually lead to a higher investment to get more reliable data. Unless you can go back to using first-party data, which is the best solution.
Have you seen this play out in real life so far? Have you seen these pressures starting to be exerted on research agencies where clients are questioning the integrity of the data collection process or the data being provided?
Yeah, that's been happening since the day I got involved in research. As I said, I started buying research for 10 years, and I used to be the one challenging it when I wasn't sure about the result. And not much has changed, many years later. But yeah, it happens all the time. But it's just now there's so much. There's obviously, and it's hard to put an exact figure on it, but it's somewhere between 30, 40, 50% of sample is actually needed to be cleaned or collected again. It's a real problem. And it's just easier for fraud these days, and it's more difficult to stay on top of it. So it's definitely happening in terms of the cost. And there's also been a shift for over a decade now to try and create your own community of customers to be able to create more first-party interactions, which should be easier in the kind of digital world that we live in now.
But even if you create those communities, right, do they still tend to be incentivized spaces where people's participation is incentivized?
So it depends on type of community, but a closed customer community, for instance, insight community, they tend to be not financially incentivized or not incentivized based on how many surveys you do. They're more about kind of the reward for those is like be part of it, be part of the inside group, be part of the people that find out before, learn from other people similar to yourself, and there might be a prize draw or something, but it's not really pay as you play or get paid for doing lots and lots of surveys.
So that really does seem to be the troubling link here, right? As soon as you incentivize participation or incentivize something, in this new world of Gen AI, you run the risk that someone's going to see enough value to automate and therefore significantly jeopardize the data quality. On the flip side, in certain types of research scenarios and research tactics, if you don't do the incentivization, you don't get a critical mass or an acceptable N size to be able to base the research off. So it's kind of catch-22.
Well, you can get an acceptable response rate without incentives, and I'm lucky to be part of a company that does exactly that. But it takes a lot of effort. You have to really you have to make sure the reward is something they value, not a kind of a dollar amount. And the market research industry for a long time has said this is not a payment because payment would mean you might have to pay tax on it, but it's a reward in exchange for your time. So there's got to be something that people value that is not that doesn't have to be money, because then if it's just money, then it's just about how fast can you do as many surveys as you can.
And to your point earlier, ultimately this problem is solvable with more investment into solving it, but we are and have been operating for a year or two now in an environment of restricted budgets. So boosting those budgets when data quality and response rates have already been compromised and therefore potentially the value being delivered from a piece of research or an internal VoC program is being compromised, it's hard to go cap in hand saying, well, if we just spend more, things will improve.
Yeah. You have to get really intentional about it. And again, I'm lucky to be part of a business where 100% is not an ad for Advantage, but we're 100% B2B, 100% using first-party data and are able to drive very, very high 80% plus response rates with zero incentives. So it's, it is possible.
So let's try and not just be the sellers of fear for this entire webinar. What are some of the solutions that we can do? So there's probably 3 or 4 that come to mind. The fourth is probably slightly controversial. So they are, and we've spoken about it at length, first-party data, unsolicited feedback for internal VoC teams, survey strategy, and then probably the most controversial one at the end, synthetic data. So let's start with first-party data.
Yeah.
And you've spoken about it at length. Advantage is in a great position that you are accessing first-party data. Internal VoC and insights teams should be in the position where they're almost exclusively working with first-party data. So, and what we mean by first-party data, for those that don't understand this, it is instead of going out to the public and trying to find a representative sample of people to collect data from to base your research on, you're instead working from your own internal customer database. So you are sending out a survey or whatever, doing a focus group, doing a telephone interview to a database of known customers where you have verified contact details. So you're significantly reducing down the risk that you are getting a response from a bot or a response from someone that you don't understand. So that's straightforward for an internal VoC and insights teams. How does this become, how can research agencies and how can internal teams wanting to work with research agencies access this first party data and reduce this risk of fraudulent data?
Yeah, I mean, in this day and age, well, there's two things happening. Like, there should be more first party data available than ever before, at the digital landscape that we live in. So everything we have, engagements, touch points, something needs to be collected. We're also living in the most kind of high attention towards security, consent, privacy, etc. as well. So it's actually ideal that we don't have to go out to an intermediary or a third party and kind of exchange information and put people's data at risk. So, coming straight from the source, first party data should be highly relevant, much more accurate and more reliable. And I think that accuracy and reliability kind of allows you to actually have the best quality. Best quality means best actual understanding of behavior, preference, needs, makes you make better decisions. It also allows you, sorry.
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, it also allows you to profile and understand more about the people that you're talking to, because they're your customers, they're on your database. So again, you don't have to keep asking them the same questions overall to make sure it's them. But you can also build the profile so that you kind of improve loyalty. You can really build a relationship with these customers using kind of their own sources of information. And again, it's more private, more secure, etc.
In preparation for this, you and I are chatting, and I think you mentioned historically there has been some resistance from organizations to share their customer database or their contact database with research agencies in order to enable this first party data. I imagine in some instances there's valid reasons, like they want to get more of a brand perception and therefore it doesn't make sense to go to just their customers. But why would that resistance exist for sharing that database? And what do you think that you could say that might help lower some of those barriers?
Well, it's because of the kind of whole information security environment we live in and the risk of privacy, is that, brands quite rightly are very keeping their databases and their customer information very carefully protected. Market research could always have the kind of reputation of this is just trying to sell things. We only want to be very careful about how we communicate to our customers for a certain thing. We might not prioritize customer satisfaction or feedback, as much as we do a kind of direct marketing message. So there's lots of reasons, and mostly it's a lack of understanding about what the alternative is. And we've been talking about the alternative, which is go and buy our own customer information. In that, we're going to get a lot of bad data and fraud involved. So it's about trying to communicate to people about why we need to use our own databases, our own first-party data, for this purpose.
Yeah, that InfoSec one is tough to overcome.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the VoC, internal VoC and insights people here, you're in a very lucky position because I am almost willing to guarantee that you have a whole host of unsolicited feedback data that you aren't tapping into right now that is a veritable gold mine for insights. And so what do I mean by this? I mean calls in your contact center. I mean live chat transcripts with a bot or with human operators. I mean emails going backwards and forwards from your support or customer care team with customers, online reviews, complaints, and a whole bunch of other places where conversations are happening about you or with your company that hold a rich set of information regarding the experience that you're providing to customers. I was talking to someone earlier who said that they get approximately 2,000 calls or interactions a month through the customer support and care center, yet they only get approximately 100 responses a month to the CSAT survey, which is, a very, very, very low percentage. You have a bunch of information that you could access today that is going to help you understand the experience that's being given to customers and what you could do to improve that experience, therefore improve customer retention, and perhaps even drive down the cost to serve customers with appropriate interventions into the product or the service you're bringing into the market. So market researchers would love to have access to the data you have access to. So I'd encourage you to use that data. I think the third one here around survey strategy, and I saw someone mention here, what can we do around survey strategy? And let me go back to my story earlier with the airline that I shared. We as researchers and VoC practitioners have a real responsibility to make sure that we are on top of our survey strategy. If your survey strategy is poor, if you're asking 20 plus questions in a survey, you are probably driving a negative sentiment around participating in those surveys and negatively impacting your own survey response rates. And there's really simple things that you can do. For example, because traditionally analyzing open-ended feedback has been really hard, I've noticed that surveys have tended to ask a bunch of really specific close-ended. I say close-ended in quotes because they're not truly close-ended questions. They're not a, why did you give us that score? They're questions like, tell us the one thing we could do to improve. And the driver behind saying, what's the one thing we could do to improve, is to try and make it easier to analyze. I could probably run that through a word cloud and look for really frequent terms, and I'm going to get some sort of insight into that. That's kind of outsourcing the work to the customer, right? You really need to be asking, go back to the original value proposition of the survey and the value proposition that Peter was talking to earlier about participating in this community, which is be early, impact the direction this company goes and the product we offer to the market. Go back and hand the microphone back to the customer, cut down all unnecessary questions, stop being lazy with your survey strategy, and truly ask people, why did you give that score? Is a good starting point, but even better, depending on the sort of product and service that you're offering to the market, tell us the story. Tell us your story about your experience with us, and really understand how they would describe that story, and really understand the factors that they rank and they are scoring your experience by. My pet peeve in surveys is when the survey asks me for information that the company should already know. A prime example might be on an airline. Did you fly economy or business? For an e-commerce store, have you received your package yet? Did you return your package? Anything like that is you outsourcing answering questions that you already have the answer to. I heard someone at the customer symposium last week say, we try to never ask the same question more than once across survey touch points. Because if we've asked it once, we already know the answer, and we shouldn't have to be asking it again. All of these things can dramatically improve your survey response rate. Is there anything on the agency side, Peter, that you've seen that's been particularly effective for boosting response rates?
Yeah, I think that's a great story, Ryan. I will say up front, having been in agency land for a long time, is that we can all do better. I can do better. Advantage can do better. We're all on a journey. What's on the screen here is a really important point, which is we're going through the transition, which is to try and maximize opportunity for people to give us some text on, why that happened. We're finding that is really useful to develop action plans on what people could do, because we have customers that get 10 out of 10. So therefore, how can they improve? Well, let's actually give the customers a chance to tell us why they gave us that score and what they need to do more of. The same if you get 2 out of 10s as well. So it's trying to maximize and make sure the order of your survey is kind of optimal for what you want to achieve with it. And again, back to think of the role of incentives. Think of what you actually want to get out of the survey and who you want to complete it and what would they find valuable. And I think that by doing that and really considering the participant experience, then the simple way of thinking about this participant experience is to look at it. It's a very simple one. Would you do the survey? Would your partner do this survey? Would your kids? Would your parents, like whoever, people that would they do this survey, and would they do it at the frequency you want them to do it? And if you wouldn't do the survey, then don't send it out. It's as simple as that.
I think it's a fantastic point you make, Peter, and I forgot to mention it. You said participant experience. I think everyone, particularly on the internal VoC and insight side, needs to remember that the survey in and of itself is a customer experience.
Yeah.
And so whatever you deliver to those customers in that survey is going to impart some sort of feeling or experience on them, and you need to be cognizant of that. One little tip or trick I really like for doing a quick 5-second check of, are you actually happy with the survey? There is always one or maybe two metrics on internal VoC surveys that the whole survey is kind of based around, right? It is either a CSAT or an NPS survey. Here is the hack. Put that question, how likely to recommend or how satisfied were you with your experience, put it at the end of the survey. If putting it at the end of the survey makes you nervous, then you've probably got a bad survey. It's probably too long. If you would confidently put it at the end of the survey, go, yeah, there's no worries putting this at the end of the survey because I know I've given them a good survey experience. It's not going to tarnish the answer they give. Then you've probably got the right survey strategy. Sorry, Peter, I'll pass back to you.
No, that's a great points, Ryan. And I think, actually just committing to quality. I know it's an easy thing to say, but, and again, I've been client side, I've been supplier side. We all need to commit to quality and be willing to pay for it and all those things that come with quality. And that's a hard thing. It's a very difficult thing for the whole industry to kind of deal with. But it's a much worse situation if our data that we're gathering is wrong, is leading to wrong decisions. It'll actually mean that people will just stop investing in market research, which would be a big shame. And VoC, if it's not leading to something, we're going to stop doing it. And I don't want that to happen.
And a quick shout out here as well. Some of the survey providers are actually doing work here to help. I saw at the Customer 360 Symposium last week here in Australia that one of the survey providers is actually integrating the AI bot in a good way. So instead of just this open-ended question box here, the box is larger. They have gamified a little meter on the side, and they have integrated AI into the box. So the longer, more detailed the verbatim response is, the open-ended question, the more the little meter goes up and kind of gives them positive reinforcement that they're doing the right thing. But at the same time, at the bottom of the box is embedded an AI, and the AI will read the response and prompt the person to go deeper and give more information, which I think is a really fantastic use of technology. All right, on to the juicy bit. Synthetic data. Let me start by trying to give a definition of what synthetic data is. So synthetic data is when you would go, instead of going out to a market and collecting 1,000 or 5,000 samples, you instead go to a generative AI and turn the creative setting all the way up. The creative setting, you can think of it as the level of randomness. So if I have it turned all the way up, there's a very low probability I'm going to get the same answer twice if I ask the same question. And you feed the generative AI a set of personas that you're particularly interested in surveying, not too dissimilar to what you would do with a research agency. Instead of going out to market and getting responses from real people, you instead get responses from the AI who's assuming the persona of the people that you want to survey. And you've turned the randomness all the way up, so you're getting different answers. Even if you're assuming the same persona, you ask the same question, you get different answers every time, ideally. Peter, why don't we just use synthetic data?
Yeah, well, this is and you and I did speak about this, Ryan. This is a really difficult subject and a really hard one for me that's been involved in market research and really tried to kind of push the quality. And the reason I got into market research is that I really love understanding how people make decisions. What we're talking about now is that we're designing, software to kind of mimic the statistical properties of real data. So that's what we're talking about. So why don't people use synthetic data? My view would be that we'd have to be really confident about the accuracy and representativeness of the data coming through there, because outside of the legal and ethical considerations that we're selling something that doesn't come from real people, we're selling something that doesn't come from real people. So, is it actually going to be accurate? So it's a difficult thing to get your head around. I can see a role for synthetic data in machine learning and testing and and to dealing with some topics where data privacy and data sharing is impossible. I can kind of see situations, but it's just something in me that stops me from saying, yep, let's just use synthetic data, because, it's not real people all the time.
There is more than something in me that says let's not use synthetic data. It's the whole of me that says let's not use synthetic data. One of your points you said is if we can have confidence in the validity of what it's providing us. And I think what's really important here for any market research-based use case is that it is impossible to have 100% confidence in the validity. Mm-hmm. The only way to have 100% confidence in the validity would be to do the exact same research study the traditional way and compare the results.
Yeah.
That's the only way, right?
Yeah.
And something that really occurs to me is, well, if we are willing to accept synthetic data, and let's invented data, made up data, from a generative AI to base our research on, why not just skip to the next step and just ask the AI to tell us the answer to the research? If it's already going to use its own collective knowledge that it's kind of vacuumed up from the internet into its large language model, if we're already going to rely on that to generate the data, why don't we just ask it to answer the research question for us and run with that back to the organization saying, here's what we should do? And if we don't have confidence to do that, why would we have confidence in the synthetic data?
Yeah, it's a valid point. I mean, that's why we need to fix the crisis we were talking about by alternative means of using first-party data, or et cetera, because there is not that much difference if you're buying bad data. Large language model needs to learn off something as well, so we have to think about the inputs into that. But yeah, you make a good point. I mean, and my hope is that we'll solve the crisis that we're dealing with now by improving the quality of responses from real people.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but and I can be a little bit less diplomatic because I'm not on the agency side, but while we incentivize participation in research in terms of direct monetary reward, not compensation, for participation in the research, we are opening ourselves up to bringing in synthetic data, whether we've asked for it or not, right? Because what I mean by that is a bot answering your survey, that is basically synthetic data. With the downside that you're not controlling what's coming through for that data. So if you're paying an agency to collect data for you and they're using some sort of incentivized based research methodology, you are basically running the risk that you're bringing in synthetic data.
Yes, you are. And that's to your point before about you turn something into a product, then people just kind of invent ways to kind of do it, to automate it and to make money via that way, rather than the original intention, which is to find out the real answer. So.
And to your point earlier, yes, there have been some, I'm not sure if it is valid, but there has been some valid use cases in synthetic data. You talked about using it to train AI. So just give people some insight into what's actually happening with that.
Yeah.
Go on. Sorry.
Yeah. So, for training machine learning models, and, I can feel like testing surveys, improving surveys. How do we actually kind of reduce time in surveys? And some difficult subjects, which, that are going to be difficult to research with real people. We might find ways of actually using synthetic data or large language model to help us with that. Certainly testing, improving, all those kind of things, I think, are going to be really important. It's just when we're talking about kind of representativeness, all those kind of things I get worried about, because, the inputs are kind of, not all the inputs are going to be from real people.
Yeah, just to give you an insight into how it is being used to train machine learning models. So something like ChatGPT is a combination of a large language model plus a final training step to get that large language model to behave like a Q&A bot and produce responses that humans like. That last training step is basically humans sat in front of the AI, feeding it questions, getting a number of answers back from the AI, and positively rewarding the answers that the human thinks are good. And that's the last training step. The problem with that training step is that humans can only go so fast, and there's only so many humans available to perform this step. So what these companies have started doing is getting the AIs themselves to do the last step. So you're training a new AI. You might get the older generation of generative AI machines there to do this last reinforcement learning, it's called, this last reinforcement learning step instead of the human to do it. You may be compromising on quality. Who knows? Something you're not compromising on. In fact, somewhere where you're winning significantly is the speed to do that last bit of the process, which is why the AI companies have gone there. I don't know how much sense it makes for the market research world to go there.
It does for sure. So, I mean, sorry, it's not only the speed, it's the consistency you can get by using the model, you know, and that's really, really important.
Yeah. So obviously this is a hard topic, the respondent crisis. I don't think, short of throwing more money at the problem, I don't think there's any silver bullets. And, you know, the world of VoC and market research is a fast changing world, and navigating emerging technologies. I don't think anyone was talking about synthetic data, 18 months ago, right? Navigating this landscape and finding solutions to making sure we have good quality data to make decisions off is a fast growing challenge. There is some things that we've covered off, particularly for internal VoC and insights teams, that are well within our control, that can significantly increase the quality of the outputs that you're producing. Stuff like the quality of the survey strategy, stuff like using the really high value information that you are likely already collecting that you're not currently tapped into in the customer support center and online reviews and complaints and other sources. So I think there's some really actionable things there for those teams. What about on the agency side, Peter?
Yeah, so maybe down to 3 points. Take a human-centric approach. What does that mean? Would you answer what you send out? Would you answer it yourself? Prioritize product, participant experience over everything else. And let's just be kind of like committed to ethical data collection. What does that mean? That means that if you think that that your responses don't make sense, and if you think that your sources of buying data is actually full of bots, etc., do something about it. Stop buying from that same source and try and change and pivot there. So the first one is really just be human about it. Second one is that we as an industry have to invest in quality over budget constraints. Otherwise, we are going to have an ROI problem for sure, and it's already here. So what I mean by invest in quality is the things that you talked about. The panel companies are doing as much as they can to try and minimize fraud, but there's just as quickly, there's clever people coming up with ways of actually getting around that. So we have to be serious about it. And the third thing is kind of a collection of the first and second thing, is that we all have a role to play, both agencies, supplier, buyers, to kind of think about solving this problem. And in my is the best way to solve this, as far as I'm concerned, is to change the data sources and use first-party data, use well-profiled panels, communities of people that are real, and check in with them and give them something in return other than a financial incentive.
I really want to make sure people, because there's one thing here that really aligns the agency and the internal VoC teams, one strategy they can use, which is the survey strategy. And for those people that didn't see our last webinar, I just want to give you a feeling for how much of an impact survey strategy can have. One of our guests on the last webinar talked about how he completely changed the survey strategy to asking a question about the experience. Tell us your story about your experience with us. And the result of the changing in that question, he saw an increase in a bunch of areas. He saw increase in survey response rates across all age groups. He saw an increase of the percentage of people that were filling out the verbatim question across all age groups. And he saw an increase in the length of the verbatims that was being left across all age groups. And that's without integrating that kind of bot prompted, tell us more about X, Y, Z. So really don't underestimate the impact that you can have by taking that human-centric approach and really putting some thought into the survey strategy.
Yeah.
All right, questions. One question here is asking about how about dropping the CSAT or NPS question altogether and moving to a happiness index question. It's an interesting question. I don't think necessarily there's a problem with that strategy. The only thing that I would caution is that a fair degree of research went into NPS and to its correlations with actual customer behaviors in the initial research on NPS. And it was shown to be the question that had the strongest correlation with positive customer behaviors later down the track. Having said that, the research wasn't just based around one question, it was based around an entire system. And the original inventors of NPS have said over and over and over and over and over again, it's not actually about the number that you get out the back. That number is more of a way to track your own progress over time. The whole point of the system is the second question. Why did you give us that score? And really understanding that why and tying it back to the number so you have a blueprint for what to do. So while that particular question really is correlated in their research with downstream customer behaviors, you could probably have some degree of confidence that it's probably somewhat irrelevant's not the right word, but it probably matters more that you're focusing on what people are telling you rather than the score that you're asking them for. And I also note with interest that in the NPS 3.0 system, they are advocating for a earned growth metric rather than just the raw NPS number. And I saw a presentation last week from Zurich Insurance where they are actually moving to an intermediary step, calculating the earned growth statistics too hard for them right now because you have to have a very good way to attribute where a customer came from. Was it a bought customer? Was it a referred customer? They've instead moved to net revenue retention, which is something that us SaaS businesses focus on a lot. Peter, anything that you want to add on that?
Yeah, just a quick one. Spent a lot of my life in this space, thinking about NPS versus happiness, etc. Thinking about scales. You need to consider how easy these scales and measures travel. Is it consistently around the world considered, 0 to 10? Is that consistently measured versus happiness versus happy face? All those things you need to think about. The earned growth is a really interesting one. That latest thinking. But also more interesting is rather than the score is what's changed. So I'm interested in looking at work where we ask people for an NPS score and then what would you have done 6 months ago, or comparing it to what they actually told you 6 months ago, and then why is that changed? That's really how you can structure actions to improve if you understand why things have changed.
And hopefully it goes without saying, but I'll mention it anyway. It is being authentic in how you're using these metrics.
Yeah.
What do I mean by that? I have seen when NPS, the number becomes a KPI and that KPI is monitored maniacally, some downstream behaviors that can come as a result of that is that all of a sudden in the NPS survey, the 0 to 6 is in black and the 7 and 8 is in orange and the 9 and 10 is in green, kind of giving people the blueprint for the number that you want. As soon as you find yourself doing anything like that, you are compromising the entire system. So irrespective of the number of the metric that you choose, make sure that you are doing it faithfully and not trying to game the system. Peter, I appreciate you jumping on. I appreciate you taking the time. I know we had some technical difficulties getting going, but I appreciate you finding fast solutions to that. You are such a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this world, and I am sure that a bunch of people have learned a bunch of things, so thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Thanks very much for the opportunity. And I hope, we've got to keep learning. Things are moving so quickly. We've got to keep on top of it. So, good luck. And let's keep talking and sharing ideas on how to solve the crisis.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ryan.